All right, so let's go ahead and look at this function one more time. This is f of x is equal to 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. The domain for this function just goes from negative infinity to positive infinity. When you're looking at domain, remember to think back about the two things that will limit the domains. That is, if you have a fraction, whatever in the denominator, any values of the function cannot equal 0. That will limit the domain. And then if you have the square root of something, whatever is underneath that square root must be strictly greater than or equal to 0. I don't have either of these two things in this function, so my domain just goes from negative infinity to positive infinity. Now, this next question, what are the x-intercepts? This is one of those things. We have to think back to what an x-intercept is. An x-intercept is what value of x exists when y is equal to 0. So what this really means is f of x is my y value. So where does this function equal 0? So this looks like a straightforward question, but it actually requires a little bit of work, because this means I have to take 2x squared plus 5x minus 3 and set that equal to 0. Now I'm going to factor this one the way I did before. Same idea. A little bit different outcome with this one though, as far as we're going to have different numbers. I take a times c and put that over b. So a times c, this time it's going to give me a negative 6. B is still a positive 5. Now, when that is equal to a negative 6, that means I need to have one number be positive and one number be negative. That's the only way I can go ahead and multiply something to get a negative 6. So for this one, because I want it to be a positive 5, the only two numbers that will work would be 6 and a negative 1. 6 times negative 1 will equal a negative 6. And then if I have 6 minus 1 is equal to a positive 5. So I still start out the same way. First terms first. So what two values do I need to put in the two first places? That has to be 2x and x. That's the only way to get the first term equal to 2x squared. Then, after that, I want to think about my inside and outside terms. I like to think of it as a little smiley face. Those coefficients for the inside and outside terms have to equal positive 6 and a negative 1. So as I'm looking at this, I'm asking myself 2x times what will either equal 6 or negative 1. Well, I need that to equal a 3. And when I do that, this outside term is 6x. For my inside term, x times what has to equal the piece that we don't have yet, which is the negative 1. So that will go ahead, and that has to be a negative 1. That gives me my inside term of a negative 1x. Put my positive there, and now this is all factored. My next step is to set each of those parentheses equal to 0. So I get x is equal to 1/2, and x is equal to negative 3. So those are my two x-intercepts. And one last question that we're going to deal with this one is, what are the y-intercept? This one's much different. You just go ahead and everywhere you have that x value in our original function, plug in a 0. So 2 times 0 plus 5 times 0 minus 3. All of that's gone, so our y-intercept is a negative 3. I am going to go ahead and write both of those as points. So my y-intercept can be written as 0, -3. And let's come back over here and write those two x-intercepts as points. So this x-intercept would be written as 1/2, comma, 0. And then the next one would be -3, comma, 0.